to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Torchwood episode Adrift, written by Chris Chibnall and directed by Mark Everest. This story is the third to last story in the series 2. It is also the last three stories are also written by Chris Chibnall, so this is kind of like the first of a Chibnall trilogy, I guess you could say. Now this story is notable for a few reasons. For one, this is actually Mark Everest's not only his first directing duties in any Doctor Who story, but it is his first directorial debut in fiction. He had always done non-fiction documentaries before turning up into this. This is actually his directorial debut in terms of a storyteller, which is very interesting. The story is very focused on Gwen, but this one is unusual because it also heavily focuses on PC Andy, played by Tom Price. Now, Tom Price has appeared in Torchwood throughout all of Series 1 and Series 2, but he's usually like a background character. He usually is Gwen's representation of her old life when she was a police officer. But here, he actually becomes a prominent character, which I'm actually really surprised, because if you talk to a lot of Torchwood fans, they say that they really like PC Andy, and how he's some people's favourite character. But his first story where he has a prominent role is the third to the last story of Series 2 in a 4-series run where 2 of the series are one complete story. I don't know what that tells you about anything, but there you go. This story also is very notable because it features the actress Ruth Jones, most known at this point for playing what's her name? From Gavin and Stacey. Pat? No, it's not Pat. It's Nessa. She plays Nessa in Gavin and Stacey, and she was a really big Welsh actress at the time. In fact, she still is, appearing in a lot of popular BBC dramas. But this was actually, she actually appeared in a Torchwood episode. She has a prominent role here. And so there are a lot of interesting things. Now, the fan base absolutely loves this story. It is considered being one of the best of the series, and it just tackles with so much ideas that Torchwood, about like the idea of Torchwood, something which could have been technically, you can think of being teased since episode 1 with all these secrecy and all of these cover-ups from inside of Torchwood. And by that, I always find it really strange because I'm curious on something. Was Series 2 planned to be the last? Because this idea, this type of story is something that you would usually tell at the end of this kind of series of Torchwood, not as just in Series 2, but overall. So, were there plans of finishing Torchwood at Series 2, or at least given the creative to another handle? I mean, this is Chris Chibnall's last series before Children of Earth, where Russell T Davies would become the main showrunner of the series. But yeah, there you go. That's a lot to talk about. This is actually the first time I've ever watched this story for this marathon, so that is extremely interesting. And let's not waste any more time. Let's get into Adrift. So the story starts off with this young lad who's getting these texts off his mother saying he's going to be late. Sorry, I was late. He sees his mother in the house. They kind of live at a boat side, and suddenly something from off the camera seems to have sucked him up, and it seems like just your average Tortured episode where there's this mystery. Clearly something has come from the wrist and has taken him in some way, shape or form, probably have killed him. And and then we cut into the main episode where we feature Gwen and PC Andy, and they're discussing this case of this missing boy. It's stated here that the boy has been gone for several months, and that he believes it's something to do with Torchwood. But Gwen doesn't seem too interested, as if missing people in Cardiff is just a usual occurrence. It's a usual, just something, it's just part of the day, part of the work, which upsets Andy because this is not like Gwen. This is not the same Gwen that we were introduced to in series 1 when he knew her at her best, in which she would care if someone goes missing. She has this kind of tunnel vision of trying to get to the bottom of things. That's basically how she got involved in Torchwood in the first place. She just kept pushing on. She just kept going. But Gwen isn't too interested in that. In fact, she's kind of annoyed at PC Andy because he didn't appear at her wedding, despite them supposedly being close friends. And we learned that Andy has some sort of crush on Gwen and isn't too keen on Reese. Reese is okay with him, but Andy has these feelings. Now, Chris Chibnall, this story, in terms of the start of it, I was getting really worried here because it felt like a lot of issues, not a lot of issues, but some of the issues that I have with his Doctor Who showrunner era was kind of seething in here, like this was the start of it, and that mainly being dialogue. Chris Chibnall seems like he likes dialogue a lot and doesn't not lend into a visual style, because this was never hinted before, and he just sort of comes out with the fact, it's like, oh yes, I'm still, the characters just come out and say, it's like, oh, you still fancy Gwen, and it's like, oh, sorry, I can't help it, I can't switch it on and off, and it just feels like it doesn't feel natural, that element that Andy fancies Gwen. Nothing else in the story kind of implies this, and you can easily ignore it at the start of the story. Just say, they're just close friends. Just completely ignore the fact and let the story be about Andy and Gwen basically having this disagreement and this distrust of one another. As Andy is basically, he's annoyed that Gwen is not taking this disappearance of this young boy, Jonah, seriously, and thinking that it's just some sort of normal, usual occurrence. They look at video footage to find that there's this video footage that takes photos every 6 seconds, and seemingly he was walking, he looked up at some sort of light which appeared just above the camera, and then vanished, and that was the last sighting ever of him. He also reveals to Gwen, which Gwen actually did not know about, is that Jack actually appeared an hour after Jonah had vanished. So that is very unusual and makes Gwen sort of suspicious of the Torchwood team. And so she talks to Jonah's mum, which is, of course, Nika, played by Ruth Jones, and she becomes this anchor for Gwen, the character which Gwen can see. She can see the pain, she can see the torture of not knowing where her son is. And I like how she comes off, when you first meet her, she kind of seems kind of normal, kind of like nothing really happened, as if like she's, it was hurting her, but now she's kind of over it. But slowly we kind of get this feeling that she's still in grief, she's still in mourning, as she's got all of these VHS tapes on the floor, and Gwen is just like, oh, you're a big fan of films. Oh no, they're CCTV footage. I look around and hope that I can see my son in the crowd. And sometimes I think it is him, but then it turns out that it's not him. She also keeps his bed exactly how it was, with the exception of the actual blankets and stuff, because sometimes she sleeps in the bedroom to try and get that sense, that smell of him. and she hopes that the police will one day find her son. And Gwen realises, if this is something Torchwood, it might not be something Torchwood related, but if it is Torchwood related, then that is that's up. If it's not up to Torchwood, it's good. But if it is Torchwood, it's up to her and the Torchwood team to solve what's going on and at least give Nika closure. And so she, with the help of Toshika, try and track down any information that they can about that day. There seemed to be no rift activity on that day, on that time. Jack doesn't remember all too much why he was there, or at least that's what he says, stating that there was a nice little restaurant near the area that he likes to. It's a little ritual of his. But you could clearly sense that there's some sort of distance. There's this awkward tension between Gwen and Jack as Jack quickly tries to get out the room. As he states, he's going weevil hunting with Yanto, as if they're kind of going on a date, which kind of brings that idea of separation in this story. And so the first half of this story is about Gwen looking into Torchwood and looking into this investigation and finding this connection, as later on Toshika gives Gwen this information that that there's a signal of rift activity, but each so often there's this little bump of, I guess you could say, anti-rift activity, and Gwen actually has this montage of tracking, and first of all, they actually don't know, and Gwen just thinks it could be a coincidence, it could be a strange notion, and that it could be, might just be a coincidence. It might be nothing. That might be what took him. That was actually rift activity. Maybe the rift doesn't just let things out; it sucks things in. This is a bit of a continuity error, because it has been stated that things have been taken into the rift before in stories such as Out of Time. So the sudden surprise that things can actually get sucked into the rift as well as throwing things out is a bit strange, but there's that's just a little nitpick in terms of the narrative. Now, this story also features a lot with Gwen and her life outside of Torchwood, as we get a lot of scenes with her and Reese discussing, or at least trying to discuss the future, trying to discuss about having kids and discussing the future in life. But Gwen is always caught up with work, and we kind of get the similar feelings that we have in series 1, where Reese wasn't aware of Torchwood and he was kind of annoyed that Gwen is focusing so much on work. It feels very much like that. I got a funny feeling this story might have actually been written before it was decided Reese was part of on the Torchwood, because that emotional hook still feels like it's there, despite the fact Reese does know, and Gwen she kind of has really complicated, she tries to avoid it first of all, and when she tries to talk it, she kind of just tries to brush it off, and at one point she learns that because Nikki, Jonah's mother, starts this group for people who have missing children or missing people, missing loved ones, and this is where the story goes from good to great. I love this scene in which Andy and Gwen, they go and come to this group meeting, and no one appears at first of all, and it looks like it's just them three, Nikki, Gwen and Andy, and it's all sitting there, it's all kind of awkward, and then one person comes in, and then another, and another, and another, and you can see it in Gwen's and Andy's face that the situation and the the sudden surprise that so many people are missing in Cardiff, it's absolute. It just it's like this huge revelation, and it clicks in Gwen, and it actually becomes kind of overwhelming as she states, it's like how I went into this helping Jonah to try and find her son and this investigation, but now there's all these other people. How am I supposed to help them? How am I supposed to just let them go? And she kind of clicks that it might have been all connected. So she runs back to the Torchwood hub, kind of leaving Andy there, leaving him stranded. And her and Tashika basically track down these anti-rift blips with missing cases people. And we learn that each time that it happens, someone goes missing. And sure, there's this really corny bit where the camera pans around her and the footage is slightly spin up to try and give it a little bit more dynamic, which I don't think it really needed. But the idea of the shot where you just see her standing in this middle of the room with all these papers kind of gets the idea across. And yes, it's a bit corny, the idea of like having all of these pictures on the wall, but it puts you in Gwen's headspace. So I think at this point it's a great point to just stop talking about the story and talk about Mark Everest. As I've stated, prior to Torchwood, he had only directed documentaries. This is actually his first work as a fictional storyteller, director. And that was a huge risk, especially on a story like this. That is a huge risk. You're asking this person who's only done documentaries before to do this story. Whoever did this, whoever said that Mark Everest should put into this, or just Mark Everest himself, deserves a goddamn medal. The idea of his documentary style kind of bleeds into the way of the story, and because this is the kind of story which is focused mainly on Gwen unraveling a mystery, basically it's her documentary, it's her point of view as she's uncovering this world, uncovering a site of not only Torchwood but Cardiff and just everything in general, that it feels like in terms of storytelling, like a documentary. And Everest brings all of that to the table. It's not like a visually stunning piece. It's not like we get like huge scenery and we have these really dynamic camera angles. The Everest is mainly focused on giving this real world feel to the narrative, and not only that, putting us in the mindset of Gwen. And in doing so, this story just feels so harmonized. It feels like Chibnall and Everest were so in sync with one another that their writing styles and their camera angles just fit so well together that I'm surprised that Everest didn't return when Chris Chibnall came to become showrunner of Doctor Who. In fact, I'm going to make a campaign. Bring Mark Everest to the revived series of Doctor Who. Come on. We could have another Adrift, but for Doctor Who. How cool would that be? And so, Gwen then, she basically lays this out to the Torchwood team, where Jack is like, okay, this is really cool and interesting work, but what do you want us to do about it? We can't track it down. The blip is only for like a nanosecond. People go missing. We can't do anything about it. And Gwen's like, what? We're Torchwood. We deal with this supernatural stuff all the time. But Jack's like, think about this logically. We physically cannot prevent it at this point. It's just a random event. There's no way of closing it as far as we are concerned. How do you expect us to proceed? And Gwen is originally like, we can tell the families, we can tell them what's happening, try and get them some sort of closure. But Jack is like, no, we will not. No, you cannot. And we get the scene of basically the Torchwood team have to decide if they're with Jack in believing that, we should act on stuff that we can actually solve, or with Gwen, where we at least try and spend a little time on helping people who have affected on their line of work, like a rift activity. And basically, all the team on Torchwood go with Jack. Now, I like Yanto. He does generally feel sorry, but he goes to Jack and he does try to talk to him and tries to help him understand Gwen's point of view, but he is essentially in this debate on Jack's side for the moment. And Owen just full out agrees with Jack, which is his character. Toshika, on the other hand, she basically is like, I'm sorry, Gwen, we tried, and then basically takes up Jack's side in the argument. Huh? Toshika doesn't seem like the person who would agree with Jack on this subject. You would have thought that, especially what she's been throughout the series, she would be at least helping, considering with Gwen, ways around this, at least trying to put into viewpoint. But just to outright go, sorry Gwen, at least we tried, and then go off with Jack, feels really out of character for her, in my opinion. And we get then this the scenes of Rhys and Gwen arguing in their relationship, and Rhys is like, what's the point in fighting for Torchwood if you can't live your own life, if you can't be normal? Like, you fight in Torchwood so people can have a normal, continuous life. But what's the point in that if you can't focus? And Gwen even shouts at Rhys at one point for not letting her focus, as she basically realizes that there's a lot of pain and torment in Cardiff, and that's mainly due to what Torchwood deal with, and they do nothing. And it's basically the idea that Torchwood has affected Gwen for the worst. This is something which I'm stating as like this feels like something which actually could have been a series finale for the entirety of Torchwood. It's an idea, or at least it could be Gwen's final story, in which these dark revelations are kind of affect her in a way which she kind of sees the negative effect it has on her life. And it's something which I'm surprised, like they put it the third to the finale. This could have been a great way of really ending the series as well. But this story actually has two parts. Before I get into that, there's a funny moment in which Gwen catches Jack and Yanto having sex. I just love how Yanto's like, I'm so sorry you had to witness that. And Gwen's like, oh no, sorry, I'm so sorry for like butting in. It was your own privacy. And Jack's just like, hey, we could have used you back there. It's like, he's basically offering her like an orgy. Does Torchwood have orgies? Come on. I mean, Owen seems like he would get involved. Like, Toshika, and it's really the girls that don't feel like they would get involved in something like this. But yeah, what's your fan theory? Yanto secretly gives Toshika this device which tracks some sort of activity which absorbs through the rift, and this device is actually putting her in this island just on the coast of Cardiff. And we basically get this scene of Andy and Gwen are basically, because Andy's like, I am going to help you with this, this is my investigation too. But Gwen kind of knows that, if he gets a part of this, then all things could break loose and he could be risking his life. And I love how Andy is like, are there any vacancies in Torchwood? If you do, will you let me know? And Gwen clearly doesn't want him to be involved. And this scene kind of culminates in a bit where where Andy asks for a boat, and then Gwen asks him to get a drink, and then takes his boat, and she has to just go shout, I'm sorry, and Andy's just left in there, basically in the mud. And so we get into essentially the second act of the narrative. Now, before I actually get into the main plot of it, I want to state that this scene, for somebody who's now watching this, with future Doctor Who episodes in mind, does this scene sound familiar to you? The character is looking, she's looking for something like a mystery. She doesn't know what she's looking for at the moment. She goes up this lighthouse that's on the coast, and she sees something which is going to become a huge turn-twisting part of the plot, and then she goes down and tries to unravel it. That is exactly what happens in the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who story, Fugitive of the Judoon. They kind of recycled that element, and it's even shot similar. It even kind of feels similar, and I don't know. That scene just reminded me of Fugitive of the Judoon, but I feel like this scene works a lot better here because we see two people carrying someone with a bag over their head, escorting them to like this underground base. But Gwen also notices that Jack is on the island as well, and he's actually escorting them from behind. Basically, this appears to be some sort of Torchwood institute, and so she goes in, basically pretends that Jack invited her in, and we discover that on this island, in this underground cavern, there's this kind of isolated hospital where there's a lot of these people who seem to be burnt, who seem to have all these markings, and each got these names on their rooms. And Gwen is like, how many people are here? What's going on? And she tries to keep a cool head until she recognizes those names. They are the names of all the people that she had been investigating who have gone missing during the same times of anti-rift activity. And she finds Jonah's room. And Jack then is basically like, I'll take it from here. Jack basically gets into the scene, and there's this massive revelation that Torchwood is this much bigger, much darker than Gwen initially thought. It's like, what are these people doing here? What is going on? And Jack's like, please, it's not what it seems like. It's something that's way beyond you. It's something that, we're trying to do our best. We're trying to help. It turns out that sometimes, every few often, the Rift actually spits out these people that it had once taken, like Jonah and all of these other individuals, and they're not the same when they come back. They have aged dramatically, maybe due to the fact that they have spent many years in a time period after the time they become Rift, and they've kind of brought them back to where they were. That's what Jack was doing there. And so Gwen then goes to meet Jonah, and this scene in which we see this broken down man who something is clearly he's not right in the head, and you clearly get the feeling that something is missing inside of him. He doesn't know anything really about the outside world. He doesn't even know he's still home, he's still on Earth, and Gwen has to basically talk to him and discuss. I especially like how she's like, you're Jonah? Oh, sorry, I'm getting you mixed up. I'm looking for Jonah, and then he's like, yes, that's me. It was me who was missing on the docks and stuff like that. And he basically tells his story that after being sucked in the time rift, he was actually taken to a burning planet. Maybe it was Earth, maybe it was something which we'll get onto. And a man saved him. An individual, someone saved him and put him onto a rescue ship. And then he somehow found himself back out through the rift. it's not stated whether he, whatever he was um, was it's not clear on whether these events aged him or whether he spent a lot of time in that side of the rift and then came back from his point of view many years later. And that's just this really horrible thought. But let's take into Jonah's words, because this isn't just a vlog series, this is a discussion on canon. Many people have theorized that the man who saved him was in fact the Doctor. But not any Doctor. The 8th Doctor during the Time War. And what he witnessed was actually the burning planet of Gallifrey. Of course, we would later learn years down the line that Gallifrey burned on the last day of Time War. That would have been the War Doctor. But it could have just been another planet that was burning thanks to the events of the Time War. And the 8th Doctor, who at that point would have been, I help where I can, I will not fight. This might be an instant of him helping where he can, but shall not fight. It's a fan theory. He never states this person by name. I believe, going by the story, going by how Jack appeared at the end of it, that the story implies it was Jack, but there's enough mystery there which kind of leads that it could be the Doctor. And Gwen talks to Jack and she's like, I think we should bring his mother involved. And Jack's like, no, if you bring her involved, you have to explain why her son is aged, about Torchwood. And Gwen's just like, yeah, okay. And she basically then goes to Nika, to go, Jonah's mother, and basically is like, I found your son, but you need to trust me, you need to believe me. She phones Andy on the phone and is like, I need you to convince her that I'm not mad about Torchwood, so please just hear me out. And Andy gives onto the phone and is like, you were never going to give me a role in Torchwood, were you? You were never going to consider me because maybe you don't like me, or maybe, you know, of your lifestyle and how it changed you. But Andy can kind of see that he's kind of third wheeling here on Gwen. And so Gwen takes Nikki to see Jonah on the island, and originally she does not believe him. She kind of freaks out and is like, what is this? This is sick. This is not my son. And Jonah kind of like slowly talks of things that she recognizes, and she slowly gets convinced, and it's such a heart-burning scene. You generally feel sad and torturous for these characters. And we get this little conflict in which she's like, I'm taking my son home. I just act like he's my father. I need to look after my boy, my son. But Gwen and the nurse there is like, you cannot. The situation is a lot more worse. And then Jonah kind of starts having this feeling, this rage inside of him, which he can feel like he cannot control. And the nurse tries to escort him out, but it's like, why? What's happening? What will happen? And then Jonah starts screaming in this urgent, almost beast-like scream, which is described as happening 20 hours a day, which I know this is supposed to be a really serious and dark story. The idea of someone screaming for 20 hours a day is kind of funny. That's really, I know it's, you know, it's something to be taken lightly, but, you know, just with that scene. And essentially we learn that on the other side of the rift, he actually looked into a dying star, which has turned him completely and utterly insane. And sometimes he has his good days where he can focus on the now, but sometimes he for most of the day he focuses on the then, on that horrific moment, and basically all the life gets sucked out of him whilst he has these these moments, these bits. And the story ends with Nikki just basically going to Gwen and is like, I wish I never knew. Do not do this to anyone else. Before you, I had hope. But now I don't have that anymore. And I know that my son is in this horrific, just unhumane life. And I cannot cope. It's utterly and incredibly depressing. And Gwen, the story ends with Gwen actually basically treating Reese to dinner in their flat, and she's like, we'll talk about anything about you want, about the future, about kids, about our plans for the future, whatever you want. And Gwen kind of breaks down, and Reese is like, tell me the story, and Gwen starts telling the story, and it fades to black into our credits. So that's Adrift. Overall, this is my favourite story of Torchwood so far in the series. It's beautifully written, beautifully executed. I have a few nitpicks here and there, like how at the start we had a few scenes where it felt a bit too dialogue heavy, which felt like it might have been a precursor to the issues I have with his run on Doctor Who, Chris Chibnall's run on Doctor Who. With Toshika acting a bit out of character in that one scene, and a continuity error on how the rift works. But they're all minor nitpicks. When the story is focused, when it is got its eye on the narrow goal of trying to emotionally mess with you with this subplot and this text, it is utterly gorgeous. And yeah, by far, best Tortured episode so far in the series. Of all of Series 1 and Series 2, Adrift, that was goddamn awesome. And you don't see Torchwood. I don't think you can ever watch Torchwood the same way again after knowing this, that even the team have secrets on their own. And this idea with Jack and Gwen and Reese and PC Andy, just the story just elevates everything it has. It could have been a little bit longer though, in my opinion. But there you go, that's Adrift. So join me next time when Luke and Clive go into a nice fun game of laser tag but get caught up in alien activity. And of course, it's up to Sarah Jane Smith and Maria to find out what the hell is going on as a war-torn alien individual is using children to utilise his plan. So I'll see you next time for Warrior of the Cudlag. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Warrior of the Cudlag. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da.